My name is Vanessa Mercer. I was 34 years old when I discovered that the people who were supposed to protect my son were the very people willing to betray him. Looking back now, I realized the betrayal didn't start with the comic books. The comic books were simply the moment the mask finally slipped. For years, my older sister, Caroline, had been the center of my parents' universe. If Caroline needed help, they appeared. If Caroline made a mistake, they excused it. If Caroline wanted something she couldn't afford, somehow, everyone else was expected to sacrifice. I learned to live with it. My son, Ethan, learned to live with it. What I never imagined was that one day, they would sacrifice him too. The day everything exploded started with a text message. My cousin Ryan sent me a photo from a collector's expo. At first glance it looked harmless. A glass display case, bright lights, collectors, standing around admiring rare comics. Then I saw the comic sitting in the center. Action Comics #1. The crown jewel, the most valuable piece in my grandfather Frank's collection. My stomach dropped. Under the display was a small card, part of a recently acquired private collection. Entire collection purchased for $60. Ling ling ling. I stared at the photo for nearly a minute. My hands actually started shaking. Then I called Ryan. "Tell me everything," I said. Ryan hesitated. The seller was an older couple. He said, probably in their 60s. They were talking about cleaning out old family stuff. They seemed pretty happy about getting 60 grand. I didn't need to hear another word. I already knew. The collection belonged to Ethan. Not legally someday. Not theoretically. It belonged to him right now. My grandfather, Frank, had spent decades building it. Rare issues, signed editions, protected collectibles, pieces of comic history. When Ethan was born, Grandpa had made his intentions clear. One day, the collection would belong to his great-grandson. Not me. Not Caroline. Not anyone else. Ethan. Everyone knew it. My parents knew it. Caroline knew it. Even Ethan knew it. The only reason the collection remained at my parents' house was because Grandpa had helped build a secure storage room there years ago. He trusted them. I never completely did. The more I investigated, the worse it became. A family friend accidentally confirmed the rest. The money hadn't gone toward an emergency. Nobody was sick. Nobody was facing foreclosure. Nobody was starving. Caroline had plumbing problems. A legitimate repair had somehow transformed into a full, luxury renovation project. New floors, new kitchen, new fixtures, new everything. And my parents had decided to fund it, using my son's inheritance, without permission, without discussion, without even informing the people who owned it. I drove straight to my parents' house. The entire drive felt unreal. Like I was heading toward a conversation that couldn't possibly happen in real life. When I walked inside, my father was sitting comfortably in his recliner. My mother was flipping through design magazines. They looked relaxed, happy, proud. Avon. I held up the photo. "What is this?" My mother immediately looked away. That was all the answer I needed. My father's expression hardened. "It's not a big deal." Vanessa. Not a big deal. I remember those exact words. I felt something cold settle inside my chest. "You sold Ethan's collection. We sold some comics. They weren't yours." My father sighed as if I were being unreasonable. "Ethan is 13. He doesn't care about comic books." The arrogance of that statement stunned me. "You didn't even ask him." "We didn't need to." My mother finally joined the conversation. "We were helping Caroline." Helping Caroline. The same excuse. The same justification. Always Caroline. Always. I looked around the room. The expensive furniture, the decorative accents, the comfortable life they enjoyed, and suddenly I understood something. This wasn't about comics. This was about entitlement. They genuinely believed they had the right to take from one child to give to another, because that's how the family had always worked. Except this time they had crossed a line. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply turned around and walked out. Then I got in my car and drove to Grandpa Frank's house. The entire way there, I rehearsed conversations in my head. Maybe he'd be disappointed. Maybe he'd be heartbroken. Maybe he'd decide to let it go for the sake of peace. I was wrong about all of it. Grandpa was sitting in his sunroom when I arrived. A crossword puzzle rested on the table beside him. Sunlight streamed through the windows. For a few seconds, I almost hated being the person about to destroy that peaceful afternoon. Then I told him everything. The photo, the sale, the lies, the renovation, the $60,000. Every single detail. He listened, without interrupting, without reacting, without saying a word. When I finally finished, silence filled the room. Then Grandpa slowly stood. He walked to the bar cart, poured himself a drink, returned to his chair, took one sip, and said a sentence that changed everything. Tell them to pack their things. I blinked. What? They don't live here anymore. His voice remained calm, almost frighteningly calm. I thought he might be joking. He wasn't. A shadow crossed his face. Not anger, something worse. Disappointment. Deep. Exhausted disappointment. They stole from my great-grandson. The words hung in the air, and they knew exactly what they were doing. For the first time that day, I saw pain in his eyes. Not because of the money, not because of the comics, because the people he trusted most had betrayed him. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Grandpa did not ask me to go with him. That afternoon, he walked across the property from the guest house to the main house, where my parents were sitting with Caroline, probably talking about backsplash tiles and cabinet colors. Later, he told me he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply stood in the living room and told them he knew what they had done. My father laughed at first. He honestly thought Grandpa was being dramatic. Then Grandpa reminded him of something everyone had conveniently forgotten. The house was his. Not emotionally. Not symbolically. Legally. On paper, Grandpa had paid for it years ago and let my parents live there because he believed family came first. He stayed quietly in the guest house and gave them the main home. Now he told them that generosity was over. My mother kept saying they hadn't meant harm. She said the collection was just sitting there. She said Ethan was too young to understand. She said Caroline needed help. Grandpa looked at both of them and said, "Then go live with the daughter you helped." The room went silent. Caroline immediately said that wasn't possible. Her renovation wasn't finished. She and her husband didn't have room. They had their own family to think about. Grandpa only nodded. Then figure something else out. By the end of the week, they were gone. The locks were changed. The utilities were transferred. The illusion of their comfortable life collapsed almost overnight. They moved from a 5-bedroom house into one rented room in a shared place near the edge of town. The cars were in Grandpa's name. The house was in Grandpa's name. Most of what they had called theirs had never truly belonged to them. That was the part that stunned me most. They had spent years acting secure, while standing entirely on someone else's generosity, and once that generosity disappeared, there was nothing underneath. Caroline did not take them in. The golden child, the daughter they had chosen over my son. I wanted distance. Her husband blocked their numbers. Caroline told people the situation had made her look bad. Not the theft, not the betrayal, the embarrassment. That was what bothered her. Grandpa was not finished. Within days, he met with his lawyer. He transferred the house, the remaining assets, and everything important into a living trust. The beneficiary was Ethan, not me, not Caroline, Not my parents. Ethan. Grandpa asked me to serve as trustee until Ethan turned 25. I accepted because I understood what he was doing. He was no longer trying to punish anyone. He was protecting the only innocent person in the family. He also rewrote his will. My parents were removed. Caroline was removed. Every person who had treated Ethan's inheritance like spare change was cut out. For a while, there was silence. Then the letters started. They were addressed to Ethan. Flowery cards, careful handwriting, soft phrases that sounded almost loving until you really read them. We miss you. We're sorry if what we did hurt you. We were only trying to help your aunt. You're still our grandson. Ethan read one card and looked up at me. Did they really think I didn't need the comics because I was just a kid? I hated that question, but I answered honestly, yes. That's why they never asked. After that, Ethan stopped opening them. Sometimes he handed them to me. Sometimes he left them untouched on the counter. Once, he wrote on the back of an envelope in pencil, "Tell them I don't want anything else from them." I thought that would be enough. It wasn't. One afternoon, Ethan's school called me. His grandmother had shown up without warning and tried to sign him out early. My mother told the secretary she wanted to take him for ice cream. Like old times. The secretary got suspicious when Ethan said he didn't recognize the person picking him up. I drove there faster than I had ever driven in my life. My mother was still in the parking lot when I arrived, sitting in her car, acting like she had done nothing wrong. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I went inside, removed her from every emergency contact list, and handed the school copies of the paperwork I had already started filing. That night, I filed for a no-contact order on Ethan's behalf. That was when they finally seemed to understand. This was not temporary. They had not just lost Grandpa. They had not just lost me. They had lost the boy they assumed would eventually forgive them. Then Caroline called Grandpa, not to apologize, not to check on him, to ask for help. Her renovation had run into problems. Permits were denied. A contractor quit. The delay could cost more money. She needed somewhere to stay temporarily with her husband and children. Grandpa listened. Then he asked if she remembered refusing to take in her parents. Caroline said that was different. She had kids. Her parents were a burden. Grandpa said no. No rooms. No favors. No temporary arrangements. That night, he told me about the call. He looked older than I had ever seen him. I spent 40 years giving, he said. And when I asked them to protect one thing for one boy, they treated it like a garage sale. A week later, a certified letter arrived from my parents. It was typed, formal, cold. We deeply regret our actions. It was never our intent to cause harm. They asked to meet for closure. Grandpa read it and laughed, for the first time in weeks. Then he handed it to Ethan. If you want to forgive them, I won't stop you, he said. But don't do it because they're family. Do it because you believe they deserve it. Ethan folded the letter and slid it into the trash. For a while after that, life became quiet. Ethan went to school. I worked from the upstairs office. Grandpa sat outside in the mornings with coffee and a book. No calls, no letters, no sudden appearances. Then one evening, the landline rang. Grandpa answered first. After a moment, he handed the phone to me. It was my mother, and she was crying. Not performing, not guilt-tripping, crying like someone who had finally reached the bottom. She said they were being evicted. She said they had nowhere to go. She said Caroline had cut them off completely. She said my father couldn't find work, and their money was gone. Then she said, the thing I had never expected to hear, I don't expect you to forgive us. Vanessa. But if Ethan could just know we're sorry. Her voice broke. I didn't answer right away. Grandpa and I sat in silence for a long time. after I hung up. "Finally," he said. "Let her speak. But only if Ethan agrees." The next day, I called her back. I chose a diner near the highway. Neutral ground. No surprises. No pressure. No second chances if she crossed a line. She agreed immediately. When she arrived, she looked smaller than I remembered. Tired. Hollow. Like life had finally taken from her the same way she had taken from Ethan. She ordered coffee and didn't touch it. Then she told me everything. Caroline had shut them out. Her husband had blocked them. The $60,000 was mostly gone. The eviction notice was real. For the first time in her life, she said, she didn't feel like a mother. I told her Ethan would decide. No pressure. No guilt. No manipulation. That night, I sat Ethan down and told him the truth. I didn't soften it. I didn't protect my mother. I told him she wanted to apologize. He stayed quiet for a long time. Then he asked, "If I say yes, does that mean I forgive her?" "No," I said. "It only means you listen." He thought about it. Then he nodded once. "Okay." One meeting. The diner looked exactly the same as it had the week before. The same faded booths. The same smell of coffee and fried food lingering in the air. The same rain clouds gathering outside the windows. But everything felt different. Because this time Ethan was coming. Grandpa came too. Although he insisted on sitting several booths away, he said he wasn't there to interfere. He was there because some moments deserved witnesses. I remember watching Ethan walk through the front door. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't angry. If anything, he seemed calm, calmer than any of the adults involved. My mother stood as soon as she saw him. For a second, she looked like she wanted to hug him. Then she noticed the distance in his eyes and stopped herself. Ethan slid into the booth across from her. No smile, no greeting, just quiet attention. My mother's hands trembled around her coffee cup. She started talking, then stopped, then started again. This time the words came out. She apologized for selling the collection. She apologized for deciding he didn't need it. She apologized for never asking permission. She apologized for choosing Caroline over him. At that last part, her voice cracked, because for the first time she was finally saying the truth out loud. Not just about the comics, about years of favoritism, years of excuses, years of treating one branch of the family like it mattered more. Ethan listened to every word. He didn't interrupt, didn't cry, didn't comfort her. He simply listened. When she finished, silence settled between them. My mother looked terrified, like her entire future depended on what he said next. Ethan nodded once. "I heard you." That was all. 3 words. Then he stood up and walked away. My mother remained in the booth, head lowered, crying quietly. Not because she had been attacked, because she had finally been seen clearly. Grandpa stood, left cash on his table, and followed Ethan outside. None of us spoke on the drive home. And strangely, that felt right. Some wounds don't heal because of one apology. Some wounds only stop bleeding. A month passed. Life became peaceful. The kind of peaceful that feels unfamiliar after years of tension. No letters. No calls. No surprise visits. No messages from Caroline. Nothing. I figured the story was finally over. I was wrong. One evening, Ethan and Grandpa were sorting through boxes in Grandpa's office. The room had become Ethan's favorite place in the house. Shelves lined the walls. Old collectibles filled cabinets. History seemed to live in every corner. I was helping organize papers when Ethan found an old folder. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them. Family pictures, snapshots from vacations, holiday gatherings, birthday parties. Then Ethan stopped on one photo. He stared at it for a long time. I walked over The picture showed him at about 4 years old. He was sitting on Grandpa's lap. In his hands was a copy of Amazing Fantasy number 15. The comic looked enormous compared to his tiny fingers. But what caught my attention wasn't Ethan. It was Grandpa. The way he was looking at him. Pride. Love. Hope. In that moment, it became obvious. Grandpa had chosen Ethan as the future owner of the collection years before he ever announced it. The comics were never really about money. They were about legacy. Ethan kept staring at the photograph. Then he looked up. I want to buy them back. For a second, I thought I had misunderstood. The comics? He nodded. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it seemed impossible. We don't have $60,000 lying around. I don't care. His answer came immediately. It's not about the money. I looked at him carefully. Then he said something that stunned me. It's about what they did. His voice was calm, steady. I want them back, because nobody had the right to give them away. The room fell silent. Grandpa looked at him. And for the first time since all this started, I saw something other than anger or disappointment in his eyes. Pride. Pure pride. Over the next several weeks, we began searching. Collector forums, auction sites, private dealers, old contacts from Grandpa's collecting days. Piece by piece, the trail emerged. The collection had been split apart after the sale. Some books had been resold. Some disappeared into private collections. Others were still traceable. Then something unexpected happened. We found the man who had purchased most of it. He agreed to meet. When we arrived, he listened to the entire story. How the collection had belonged to Ethan. How it had been sold without permission. How family members had treated a child's inheritance like a bank account. The man grew quiet. He looked uncomfortable. Then he made an offer. He would return everything he still had for $10,000, a fraction of what he had paid, not because he had to, because he wanted to help make things right. Grandpa didn't hesitate. The deal was completed that same day. Onebu won. Pieces of the collection came home. Action comics. Detective comics. Amazing fantasy. Not everything. Some issues were gone forever, but enough returned. Enough to rebuild. Together, Ethan and Grandpa designed a new display. This time, it wasn't hidden in somebody else's house. It wasn't dependent on anyone else's promises. A secure display case was installed directly inside Grandpa's office. Every comic was cataloged, photographed, protected. Ethan created handwritten information cards for each issue. Who the character was, why the comic mattered, what made it special. Then one afternoon, while arranging the final books, he taped a small handwritten note at the bottom of the display. I noticed it while helping him clean the glass. The note read, "Property of Ethan Mercer. Given by Frank Mercer. Returned with help. Never to be taken again." I had to turn away for a second, because suddenly I couldn't trust my voice. We never heard from Caroline again. Not once. As for my parents, they eventually moved out of state. Months later, a short email arrived. Only 2 lines. "We're sorry. We understand now. Thank you for protecting him when we didn't." I showed it to Grandpa. He read it, walked to the bar cart, poured himself a drink, sat beside the window, and said nothing. Neither did I. Some things stay broken. Maybe they should. Not every relationship earns another chance. Not every apology rebuilds trust. But that's not the part of this story I remember most. What I remember is Ethan, the boy everyone dismissed because he was young. The boy they assumed wouldn't care. The boy they thought would simply forget. Instead, he became the strongest person in the room. He didn't scream. He didn't seek revenge. He didn't spend years chasing bitterness. He simply decided that what belonged to him mattered, that his great-grandfather's legacy mattered, that respect mattered, And then he fought for it. Today, the display case still stands in Grandpa's office. The recovered comics sit behind glass, protected, preserved, safe. Ethan still reads comic books, but he never touches the ones in the case. Once. I asked him why. He smiled, looked at the collection, then answered with a maturity far beyond his years. They're not for reading anymore. They're proof. And somehow, after everything our family lost, that felt like the most valuable inheritance of all.